Joining us now, Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He is a member of the Foreign Relations, Judiciary, and Appropriations Committee. Senator, always good to see you. We have a lot of ground to cover with you this morning, but let's just first start with a beat on what you're seeing in Southern California there. What is your view as to the appropriateness of the President of the United States not just deploying the National Guard over the objections of that state's governor, but also now sending Marines to the streets of an American city?
Well, Jonathan, this is a striking moment, and it is urgent and important for folks to speak up and push back on the president politicizing our military. The right to peaceful protest is right there in the Constitution. And as long as these protests are peaceful and local and state law enforcement have them well in hand, as the chief of police of the LAPD has said, I see no good reason for the National Guard to be called out or active duty combat trained Marines. Law enforcement is trained to handle these protests, not active duty military. And frankly, it is simply upping the ante and creating a spectacle that is the real goal here of President Trump. I'll remind you, our reality TV show president is a master of distraction. And last week, all we were talking about here in the Capitol was Elon Musk attacking his big, beautiful bill as a budget and deficit buster, and a few anxious Republican senators saying that the bill that is come over from the House to the Senate that will rip away health care from 16 million Americans is a bad idea. Today, all we're talking about is the protests in L.A., and that's on purpose. It's a distraction.
Well, let's not ignore the bill. That's actually where I was going to go next and ask you, Senator, where does it stand, and exactly what do you see in the bill that is perhaps detrimental to the American people, especially those who voted for President Donald Trump?
Well, later today, Mika, hundreds and hundreds of faith leaders, clergy, rabbis, priests, ministers, are going to gather on the steps of the U.S. Capitol for a peaceful vigil, reminding senators in our nation that no faith teaches that you should take away food from hungry children and health care from seniors and children in order to pay for a bigger tax cut for billionaires and the biggest corporations. That is the core of what this bill does. It extends tax cuts for the very wealthiest Americans, and in order to try and pretend that they are paying for it, it is changing the rules of Medicaid to impose new paperwork requirements that will disqualify or throw off millions, either by ending the tax breaks that make the Affordable Care Act affordable to the middle class, or by imposing new requirements that working folks won't be able to meet, and they'll thus lose health care. This protest, this peaceful vigil, is just a reminder that for all of us who count ourselves as people of faith, or for Americans who are concerned about the qualities of our nation, this is a critical moment. Dictators around the world are cheered by the visual of our president deploying troops to try and suppress domestic protest. Here in the Senate, we need to focus on what we're teaching our children and the world about our values. A budget is a moral document, and this budget bill is an immoral document.
We'll be following that. And I know as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I'd love to get your take on this next story, along with General Barry McCaffrey. Russia attacked multiple cities in Ukraine overnight, less than 24 hours after what Ukrainian officials described as the largest drone assault of the war so far. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel has the details.
Russia is attacking Ukraine on a level not seen before. This morning, Russia's main targets were Ukraine's cities, civilians in Kyiv, sending families down into the subway stations. Russia firing on residential buildings and a maternity hospital in Odessa. President Zelensky said Russia fired 315 drones and 7 missiles overnight after yesterday launching nearly 500 drones and 20 missiles, the highest number of attacks since the war began. But Ukraine says it shot down nearly all of them. As the U.S. continues to publicly push for peace, the attacks appear to be part of Russian President Vladimir Putin's response to Ukraine's surprise drone attack earlier this month, deep inside Russia, that, according to an NBC News analysis, destroyed at least 10 Russian strategic bombers.
Ukrainians seem to be feeling a bit more confident these days. Yes, there have been many Russian attacks, but the fact that the Ukrainians have been able to stop almost all of them while also inflicting heavy damage on the Russian side is lifting spirits here.
In the southern city of Mykolaiv, you could hardly tell there's a war going on.
This is not the impression that most people have of Ukraine. Everyone out, kids out, playing. There were Russian attacks just a few hours ago, yet people are still out and about.
I can't wrap my head around it either, says Olga Dubrovna, an oncologist and mother of two. Can you imagine people get used to this? People are dying, kids are dying, and tomorrow the sun is shining and we keep living, she says. Despite the tensions, Russia and Ukraine still managed to exchange prisoners of war on Monday. Ukrainian POWs returning to their families, all soldiers under 25 captured by Russia. According to a Russian official, Ukraine freed an equal number of Russian troops.
All right. I want to start with Barry McCraffrey, General. Just curious in terms of your response to the latest developments out of Ukraine, this horrific set of developments, but also in lieu of serious U.S. engagement, what does Ukraine need and where can they get it?
Well, look, our Secretary of Defense was just attended a NATO meeting. There's almost no press coverage at his choice. He then skipped the meeting of the allies and partners supporting Ukraine, more than 50 nations,
right, and
came home quietly. So we've got one of the most desperate wars going on in Europe since World War II. It looks like World War I Battle of Verdun with UAVs and remotely piloted vehicles on top of it, high-tech jamming. The Russians are in a desperate situation, I think. 1 million casualties. Their economy battered by this ongoing war, which has largely been unsuccessful to them. So I think the problem is that our NATO allies see us as withdrawing from the defense of Europe. We still have 100,000 troops there, but they no longer can trust us to stand with Ukraine or to stand with NATO. Europeans are under tremendous pressure. They're starting to rearm. It's a perilous moment without U.S. leadership.
So, Senator, let's get you in on this Ukraine situation and the current status there. It does not escape attention that every time President Trump sends public signals like he might step away from the conflict, away from peace talks, Russia seems to step into that void and only escalate their bombardment of Ukraine.
Let's be clear. Putin is a gangster and a thug who continues to use his advanced military to strike hospitals, schools, daycares, civilians. When Ukraine punches back, they strike bombers and Air Force bases. There is no equivalence between the Ukrainians who are fighting bravely to recover their sovereignty and their freedom and Russia, which under Putin is the aggressor. A bipartisan group of senators met last week with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who shared with us both alarming intelligence, now publicly shared by the head of German intelligence, that Russia is rapidly rearming well beyond what they need to conquer Ukraine. It is their intention to test all of NATO. The good news here, Jonathan, is that our NATO partners and allies like Germany are dramatically increasing their defense spending. The Ukrainians continue to fight with ingenuity and determination. Putin is trying to break our spirit and our alliance. And President Trump will go down in history as an enormous strategic loser on America's behalf if he allows that to happen. The headline, Putin wins, Trump loses, would be catastrophic for Europe, for the United States, and for the Ukrainian people. Right in front of us is the opportunity to resupply Ukraine's air defense, to partner with NATO, and to make possible peace through strength. which is the watchword, after all, of Republicans. There are many Republican senators who support continuing to arm Ukraine. President Trump simply needs to embrace this moment to push Putin to accept a just peace in this war.
Democratic member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. Thank you very much for coming on the show today.